Welcome to Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. Join Toby Malone and TJ Young, along with some special friends, as we puzzle our way through what we once thought was an unreadable book to produce a surprisingly listenable podcast. It is Monday, December 23rd, 2024. It has been 215 days since we've started reading, with 554 pages complete of 628, meaning we have 74 pages left to go and are 88.22% of the way through Finnegans Wake. Welcome to episode 35 of Wake, the podcast that's ramping up the personal anxiety, and not for the reason that we think we can't finish this reading, but for the exact reason that we know that we are going to finish it. And what are we going to do at that time after that, after we've fulfilled a long-held bucket list item, reading James Joyce's Finnegans Wake out loud just once? I'm your host, Toby Malone, joined once more by the man who helps calm my anxiety better than anyone I know, TJ Young. Hey, TJ.
Hi, Toby. I'm glad I could do that for you. Now, if someone could calm mine, that'd be great. I'm kidding. You do a good job of that.
I sort of throw my hat in the ring every now and then.
Oh, yeah. You tell me, shut up. You got this. And you're fine. And it really does help.
Good. That's what I like to hear. I had a little bit of personal anxiety before, but when you missed the last episode because you were called into a department meeting, which is, part and parcel with what happens in academia sometimes. But
yeah, you know how it is when you're like, oh, my day is free. Oh, JK. Yeah. That's been hijacked now.
But I don't know if you have a similar kind of separation anxiety to I do to the idea of finishing the podcast, like actually wrapping something up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'd be lying if we haven't said that we've talked offline about like what's our next podcast project. Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be Joyce. I think it's going to be anything but Joyce. But yeah, I sort of always get that. I get the same kind of separation anxiety at about 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve, where I'm like, no, I'm not done with this past year yet. I don't want to learn a whole new year. I have to
Oh, we can throw this year away. I'm totally fine with that. 2024
no, that's fair enough.
Can go in the garbage bin.
Well, I'm very glad that we got to the end of 2024 and managed to reconnect with one of our old friends. I'm very delighted today to welcome our guest, one of my oldest friends who goes back many, many years with me, back to a time of mutual trauma in the Toronto theatre scene. A playwright, a novelist, and as I said, compatriot in Toronto theatre scene trauma. It is Jason Rothery. Welcome, Jason.
Hello, good morning. I think Mutual Trauma was the name of my rock band.
Yeah. Well, you got to use that somewhere.
Mutual Trauma.
It wasn't exactly.
The history of humanity is mutual trauma.
that kind of, yeah. And the trauma that we shared at in Toronto theatre scene. I mean, at least we were working in the Toronto theatre scene. It's just
best kind of.
Just
trauma.
Turns out that it's a pretty toxic place to be sometimes. Yeah, exactly. So back when we first met, you were primarily a playwright.
True.
We met on a show. We did Oh What a Lovely War at the theatre company in Toronto, and I was the dramaturg, and you were. At the time, I thought you were an actor because you were in that show, and then it turns out that you were there because you were the playwright of the company.
Dressed in a Pierrot clown outfit with the poofy lapels.
That's right.
Paint a clear visual picture.
That's right.
And you thought, this is clearly...
Yeah, and you were playing
I was a Swedish general.
The one that I remember was that you were playing a Swiss general, and so you had a Swiss accent.
Well, I basically... because the reason that I was playing the general is that the director, are we allowed to name him? I think he was in a dream of mine the other day.
I think it's best if we don't.
And I kept meaning to ask how he'd gotten back to the gig because I was like, didn't you go through a bit of shit there for a little while and now you seem to be back running the company? But this was a dream that I had. But the way that he had cast the show was, it was day one of rehearsal, and we all came and sat around the table, and as the cast, and this is a cast of like 20 or 30 people, it was a very big cast, and he would literally just point at people and go, okay, you read this, you read that, and then when the Swiss general came around, he just was like, okay, you read that, and the first thing that came to my mind was Swedish Chef from the Muppets. And so that's what I did. I just read as the Swedish chef. And apparently that worked, because then that was my part. It's all great casting decisions are made. That is a Muppet, and you're good.
Yeah, I fit that show very well, and there's my lasting memory. And then not long after that, as the dramaturg in the company, I ended up being paired with you to work on some of your shows. And so you had a play called The Ring Around, which I loved, which is about the plague, but you also had a play called Cat versus Duck, which is about T.S. Eliot and Groucho Marx. And
I love that play.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
I mean, I think part of the point of what we're doing here is we're trying to amplify your playwriting career, get you back on that track.
There are any theater companies out there that produce a show about two very old white men reminiscing about the trajectory of their lives before they die. Please contact me.
I know a place in Iowa that sounds like their jam. So,
oh man, this play would kill in Iowa. Iowa, probably parts of Montana, maybe Wisconsin. I'm just guessing at the whitest parts of the U.S., but I'm not. This is a fascinating. So I got to say that Cat versus Duck stemmed from a friend of mine back in the day, Jeremy Hechtman, who used to run the Montreal Fringe Festival. Pitched me this. He was a huge Marx Brothers fan, and he wanted to work on a show. And he pitched me this idea. He's like, "Did you know that Groucho Marx and T.S. Eliot one time had dinner together? Like they one off, never saw each other again in real life." And I didn't really know anything about either one of those. I'd not really seen any Marx Brothers movies. You're forced in school to read a bit of T.S. Eliot poetry, but I was like, oh, okay, well that sounds interesting. And a few years later, given the opportunity to write, because Soul Pepper is a classical play production company, so they like to kind of have a little bit of, I think, a bit of the stink of history on a thing is how I came to think about it. Like as long as a play has already been accorded the accolades of being a classic, they're in. But so I wanted to pitch something to them that had a bit of a whiff of, yes, this is, T.S. Eliot, well-known poet, obviously Groucho Marx, well-known performer. But the more that I started, I really fell in love with both of them. I watched all the Marx Brothers movies, and there's a remarkable trajectory to those films. Because the one that we think of as the all-time classic is probably Duck Soup. If you ask people, what's the best Marx Brothers movie? Mm-hmm. And Duck Soup is, for my money, their best film, but it bombed. It totally tanked at the box office. And because it happened to be the first film that they had made that was not based on a vaudeville show, they would do their vaudeville show, they would tour it, they would refine it, then they'd film it as a movie. Duck Soup was their first, let's just try to kind of tell a story, like a self-contained narrative. And it's obviously still a Marx Brothers movie. It still has very much of a vaudeville feel, but it's a standalone film. It's not based on their stage show. And unfortunately, because it flopped, the lesson that they took away from that is, we shouldn't do this anymore. We should not make self-contained films. We should go back to this vaudeville style of filmmaking that has been so successful for us before. And it really kind of led to the slow deterioration. Like the films from after Duck Soup, they just get really bloated and kind of lazy, and you can tell their heart's not really in it. But years later, Groucho Marx starts getting letters from T.S. Eliot. At that point, probably the world's most famous poet, who's saying, "I'm a really big fan. Could you send me a headshot?" And so Groucho Marx sends him his most debonair possible, studio, Sears Roebuck, very, classy black and white photograph. And T.S. Eliot writes him back and says, "Oh, thanks, but would you mind sending me one with the mustache and glasses?" He really wanted the Groucho Marx look. And this sparked a friendship, like a pen pal friendship that lasted for years until the two of them finally got together and had dinner. And we know almost nothing about this dinner except for a few letters that Groucho Marx wrote to his brother Gummo. They actually did refer to each other as their Marx Brothers stage names. Saying that it was kind of awkward and there was cats involved, and they were each trying to kind of impress each other and failing to do so. So yeah, it sounds like it wasn't the world's greatest meet, but I tried to imagine other aspects of this dinner and kind of created a fantastical version of it. But yeah, no, I love that show, and I would really love for it to get produced at some point once we start producing shows about old white men again.
Yeah, I connected TJ with that play, I think, years ago.
Oh, yeah. I love it.
So the playwriting has been kind of put to the side a little bit because you've moved over. Now you're a novelist. So in terms of what was that process like to change mediums in that sense?
It was born from frustration. I had, after our theater trauma, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. This sucked. If this is basically because the company we were at was so famous and so popular and so well known that it sort of felt like this is the mountain, right? Like we made it, we got to the mountain, we climbed, we summited the peak, and I'm looking out and I'm like, yeah, this sucks. I'm sad. Maybe this was the wrong mountain. So I went back to university and did an MA at York, which I loved. I had such a great time. I think school is wonderful if you're ready for it and you want it. I think that was the mistake I made in my undergrad, was just feeling like, oh, I'm supposed to go to university and I'm like just this continuation of high school and your whole life of schooling. And I really struggled in my first year of undergrad. But yeah, going back to do a master's, I just had such a ball. It was just such a different ecosystem there. Like the people, like you're surrounded by other smart keeners, ideally, who are kind of helping to spur you on. So then I was like, well, I had such a good time doing this, and I'd fallen in love with a media history course that I took. I'm going to go and do a PhD. So I went, moved to Ottawa, went to Carleton, started doing a PhD program. Kind of pretty much the same thing happened. Like I was doing really well. I was getting tons of scholarships. I was winning awards and getting stuff published but really hated the writing. Like academic writing, I don't have to tell Toby. Or both of you, sorry. It's just like writing stereo instructions at a certain point. And I was just like, I can't imagine continuing to do this. It's in particular because of the whole publisher perish mentality. If you're not doing this, there's something wrong. So you have to do it, even if you don't feel like there's a larger purpose beyond securing tenure or whatnot. So I had a similar weird moment of like, oh man, I just scaled another mountain and now I'm looking out and I don't like this view and now I'm not sure what to do with myself, because I quit theater and now I'm thinking I'm going to quit academia. And around this time, somebody that I had done my undergrad with. So this person had gone on to become a quite famous Canadian literary superstar, published a couple of really well-received books, won a bunch of like crazy awards, became the chair of the creative writing department at UBC, and then proceeded to end up embroiled in this crazy scandal. What was the scandal? We don't know, because UBC put out a press release that said, hi, everybody, we're firing this famous person who's the chair of our department, and we're not going to tell you why, but it's probably something weird and sexual, but don't ask us to clarify that. Just go about your lives and know that we fired him. And of course, that worked beautifully, because everybody just let it lie and didn't ask any questions, or it didn't become a huge media firestorm. So 2 weeks after this, UBC put out a second press release that basically said, yeah, sorry, we probably shouldn't have put out that first press release. So if everybody could just leave us alone and go on with their lives and imagine we never did that would be great. Thanks. So that was awesome. And just because I had now at this point been in university for 7 years, again, doing graduate school stuff, and the atmosphere was so different than like when I was a little undergrad kid. Everybody was up in arms about like capitalism and WTO and the battle in Seattle. Like everybody was reading No Logo and Adbusters, and that really felt like the cause that we were all fighting. And then now 10-12 years later, that has all been pushed to the wayside, and everybody seems very concerned about sort of gender and transgender rights and safe spaces and trigger warning. Like these are kind of the buzzy sort of causes at the time. And I was just fascinated by this. I thought, wow, what a lane change from just even 10 years ago from when I was in school. So it kind of, I just instantly a book popped into my head. I was like, I know how to tell this story. I know how to tell this story about this person who gets embroiled in this sex scandal, and in particular, somebody who wants to present themselves as the most enlightened, the most virtuous, like the person who's on board with all the right things, but in their behavior is not living up to any of those standards or any of those beliefs, and is fundamentally a hypocrite. And that, I think, is probably my overriding fascination with society at large, is hypocrisy, because we're very quick to call people out on things without sort of necessarily recognizing our own complicity or culpability. We're all part of the system. And anyways, that's how privilege was born. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to stop fixating on school. I'm going to stop fixating on it. I'm just going to take a few months and I'm going to see if I can write a book. And it was really just for fun. It was just to get this giant thing out of my head. I described it to somebody as taking the world's biggest, greatest shit. And it just felt so good to get it all out of my system. And actually the whole, like, publishing it was really just, I hadn't put any thought into it. So I just sent it out to a bunch of indie publishers and got lucky. A retired person who had founded a company really liked it and convinced the house that he had founded to put it out. So that's how that came about. It was fun.
Yeah, and I got to work with you on that. I read a bunch of early drafts and
enormously
got to sort of, well, just, I mean, I've always said, and this is how I work with TJ as well, is that dramaturgy is all about a conversation, and so being able to sort of have a conversation with someone about the thing that they've made, it's nice to feel helpful as well in that sense, where I say, well, yeah, tell me about this moment, and you go, oh, and then you can unlock something or
what luck too. I just
figure out a way forward.
I can't help but think about how because we obviously had known each other and had a working relationship at that point, but like, what luck for me to have somebody who also understands academia and has a whole background in that area. Because I really, there is a lot of theater in the book as well. So you're obviously familiar with that, but then also you had been navigating, universities for years and years and years. It was just such a blessing to have you come in and help me with that project. I don't know if I've been able to finish it without that help.
Well, that's really nice to hear. Yeah, it was. I really love working on that one. And then you have a new one that's out now, called Reg, which is your science fiction version book. So, I mean, we'll get a link to both of these books in our show notes. I'd love to just sort of continue unraveling the world of Jason Rothery for the entire podcast, but we should get to talk to about Joyce a little bit. TJ, have you ever thought about novels?
Short stories. I've thought about novels. I have ideas for novels. I actually have an idea for like if Harry Potter wasn't lame, which and I have like the magic system worked out in my head and everything like that. But I was like, let me sit down and I'm now going to become a TYA author, which I'm not going to do right now. That's later on in life, but I have a couple like TYA books in my head that
would you publish under your own name, or would you go shoot?
100%.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: there's another TJ. I forget his last name. I think it's like TJ Klein or something like that. Right. And he has a series of like mythology-based TYA novels. So I feel like we'd be fighting for space.
Right.
But I might use my like second middle name that no one ever knows. So
I don't think I actually know it.
Haha.
And so, I'm not going to call you out on the pod, but one day I'll find it out.
You should just use a string.
So,
well, see, the thing is, all my initials actually spell out TJ. It spells TJAY. So, it wouldn't work either.
Jason, in terms of your relationship with James Joyce, just to take an abrupt right turn, do you have you read any of his work before? Have you got a relationship with it as a recovering literature major?
James Joyce is like an attractive stranger at the bar that I have spied from across the room and thought, man, they look cute. Maybe I should go strike up a conversation, but ultimately I'm too embarrassed to approach them. And so I just drown my sorrows.
And then you realize when you go up to ask them a question, they only speak Esperanto.
Right. You're like, oh, shit, what have I got myself into? I don't know. I really don't know a lot about Joyce. I certainly, you can't not be aware of his like stature in literature. But he's always sort of struck me as one of those artists. I think a lot of artists start to feel like when you operate in a particular art form for a while, it's very easy to kind of get bored, and then you start trying to impress yourself, or you start trying to impress other artists rather than maintaining a relationship or a like artwork that you're creating for an audience. I feel like this, and this, I think this happens to most people, most artists that operate in any discipline for a while. And I think Joyce is always, to my mind, rightly or wrongly, I don't know where I got this from, he's always stood as the standard of, here's what happens when an artist starts creating purely for the sake of creating interesting stuff for themselves or for a select group of other people that they're trying to impress. This, I don't mean this to sound negative. That's not what I mean, but that kind of degree of like almost insider knowledge of the craft and wanting to fuck with that, which can be very intimidating as a reader. Like why, like, because it feels almost like you're entering a bit of a cloister or a cigar smoke filled room full of secret codes that you're not privy to. And I think a lot of people just go, oh, that's not for me. I'm going to back off and go read whatever. Stephen King. So yeah, I've never, to my knowledge, I've never read any James Joyce. I know very little about him, but I've always held him in very high esteem also for some reason. Yeah,
I mean, I would strongly urge you to try Dubliners as a way in for what he's trying to do, because they're short stories and the entire book is 185 pages long or something, 150 pages long. It's not much, but it's all these 15 stories about people in Dublin, and it gives you a sort of good sense of where he started, at least. Obviously, that was where he began. That was in 1904. He finishing a lot of those, whereas this one was finished in 1939. And by the time we got to the end, we've talked a lot in this podcast about how Joyce probably couldn't be Joyce today because the patronage system just doesn't work that way anymore. Whereas he had the support of a lot of really powerful people behind him, like Sylvia Beach, who really pushed to get things like Ulysses published. And then on the strength of Ulysses and the controversies of Ulysses, he was able to get Finnegans Wake at least out there. I'm not sure that he would have that kind of freedom today. I don't know. I mean, for both of you, do you find that writing to your audience is a major consideration?
I mean, I can answer that first. For me, it's always like, I'm going to write what I write and the audience will find it. But that is a stance that I can take as someone who has a stable 9-to-5 job. And my writing isn't the thing that sustains me purely, you know? So I know that I'm speaking from a place of like financial privilege and artistic freedom and being able to do that. But, you know, I also feel like you can sniff out the things that are written for like mass consumption, and you're like, okay, well, sure. Like it's funny that you mentioned Stephen King, because I actually feel the same way about Stephen King. Stephen King doesn't vibe with me because I'm like, okay, cool, just another object that kills people. Fine, cool, great. It's not for it's not for me. It's for somebody, and there's lots of those somebodies out there. But I'm unsure of like. But I also understand that Stephen King only gets paid when he writes a thing that people will buy, right? So,
Jason, your most recent novel, Reg, is science fiction-y, and you were worried about finding an audience for that, and you ended up self-publishing that. I mean, was that sort of much of a consideration for you as you were writing?
I think it actually stems from having been in theater for so long that you are very acutely attuned to your audience. When you're on stage performing, in particular when you're in a run of weeks, like Oh What a Lovely War, we did 4 weeks of that show. And we actually initially, I think I don't read reviews all that much, and I think the reviews were not that good. But the show really found an audience. Like it was, for all my issues with that company, I thought it was a really wonderful production, and everybody I know saw it was very moved by it. But it's weird when you kind of start off on that foot of like, oh, the Globe and Mail said we're bad, and so now we're not, we're seeing like 3/4 half houses. But then over the course of the run, it really picked up, and I learned a valuable lesson about not trying to psychoanalyze your audience through that run, because one of the quietest audiences we had, I ended up doing a talk back for. And they were all like elderly retired people who had come in for a matinee. They'd all been bused, and they were 201, like they were in tears at the end of that show. And I realized we had thought, those of us on stage were like, oh, they're quiet, they're not that into it, they're not laughing at the parts where people usually laugh. And it's very easy to get into that mode of trying to, you don't want to try to shape your show based on how the audience is responding to it. But it turned out they were all just very moved by the whole thing. And that was probably one of the most kind of appreciative audiences. But I only realized that because I went out after to talk to them. And so I think I carry that with me when I'm operating as a writer, of going, on the one hand, you do have to be attuned to what your audience is doing and how they're reacting. But at the same time, you can't tailor what you're doing to try to accommodate that. So I would second what TJ just said. Like, when I write something, it's because I want to write it, and I'm writing the book that I want to read personally. And actually, I love Stephen King. I used to love Stephen King a lot more. He's gotten really, really lazy over the last few years. But some of his earlier books are some of my all-time favorite books. And I think that he managed to tap into something really interesting, which was there is a literary quality to his writing. He doesn't do it as much anymore because he's lazy, but he used to be a far more eloquent writer that also just seemed really keyed into, like, what is the trashiest, grossest, weirdest, most depraved aspects of humanity, and how do I blend these things together? I was thinking of a book like The Dead Zone, which was made into the David Cronenberg, Christopher Walken movie. It's a really classy, beautifully written book that also is just about a guy who goes into a coma and wakes up with, like, the ability to see into the future. So it's very pulpy, but it's really beautifully written. And I think that, to my mind, is what I'm trying to do, is go, I want the most people possible to be able to enjoy this, but I also want to push them while they're reading it. I want to push what they think their capacity is.
And it's interesting, if you want to ever know what kind of man James Joyce was in that sense, because he was writing Finnegans Wake. It took him 16 years to write Finnegans Wake. And along the way, he published multiple excerpts in short form, sort of little chapters, and he put them out there. And the response was universally negative. Everyone said, I don't know what this is. I hate this. People were throwing things. People just sort of saying he had gone mad. They had to publish a volume apologizing for it, with all of his friends coming out and in defense of it, including Samuel Beckett coming out and despite all of that, despite the reaction, nothing changed in Joyce's process. Joyce said, no, this is the book. This is how it's going. Because he could very easily have written those excerpts and then gone back and revised them to make them clearer, but he didn't. Or he obviously revised a lot, but he didn't bow to that pressure. And that's one of the things I admire most about him, because I think he probably could have made a lot more money if he'd been a little bit more populist, and he refused. But that's what I've always admired about both of you as playwrights, is that you're always interested in writing the plays you want to write, not the plays that you feel as though someone else wants, an audience wants. You're going, no, sometimes, you TJ, you've got some popular plays that go off because you go, well, I'm going to write the play that's going to be good in high schools, and then high schools perform the thing. And
in both of those times, I'll fully admit it's because someone's like, I am paying you to write this play.
Right.
Like, and I tell my students, I was like, this isn't the play that, like, stirs my soul or is, like, the most pure form of my artistic integrity. I was like, someone's like, I recognize your skill. Here's money. Write this thing. And I say, okay.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's part of the job of it as well,
Yeah. But if they were to ask you to write something like that was, a pro-Trump play, you would say no, right? You have your integrity, but whereas when someone says, I want you to write a play about Caliban, you go, hey, yeah, cool, good idea. I'm going to go do that play. So there's, so it's, I think Joyce is a different kind of creature. And Jason, you were saying that you got to glance through some of the reading we're doing today, and you got a sense of the kind of man we're dealing with. And so I'm looking forward to reading that with you. We're going to get into that now. Are you looking forward to the reading, or are you girding yourself?
I'm nervous. Like, I have it up on my screen and I'm trying not to read it. But just even as my eyes dart around, I've wondered what I've gotten myself into. I loved the Alice in Wonderland books when I was very small. I still love them to this day. And
Right.
the Jabberwock was my favorite thing ever. Like when I discovered that poem in, I think that's through
Yes.
it
was brilliant.
For years, for auditions, I would read the Jabberwocky poem. But there is something about this style of like it's not word soup, but messing with our sense of language and understanding and just like contorting that. I think I don't want to speak to it before we've actually done the reading, but there's something just my hit off of this is something happening here.
Good. Well, I mean, the point is that you just read it, and it's not about meaning, and that's a big thing that has tripped us up a lot over this time of doing this book, is that we've been trying to find meaning when really the time we've had the most fun is when we've allowed ourselves to unshackle ourselves from meaning and just go. And the thing that may help you with a little bit of context is this book is universally agreed to be a book of dreams. So it's set over the course of an evening of a dreamer, and this is describing what happens in his dreams in a certain sense, so that nothing is really anchored. And this chapter is quite interesting. This is book 3, chapter 4, and which is called Dawn. So the sun's starting to come up. So like we see the first glimmers of light, but then we also get a sense. And so from Joseph Campbell, who wrote the Skeleton Key to Finnegans Wake book, he has suggested that this is the chapter in which the sleeper wakes up briefly, and he wakes up and rolls over, like you do in the middle of the night. And he has suggested that Campbell has suggested, and so just to quote him here, John dreams having dissolved with the dawn into the form of his sleeping father, the realities of the waking world begin to break through the tissues of the dream. It is the morning after the night of the winter solstice. So he suggested that this is set on the night of the winter solstice, which is the longest night, which also happened to be 2 days ago when we're recording. But so we start this chapter with a sense that the dream is starting to break up and the reality is starting to pour in. And I owe a debt of gratitude of the Flute contextual website. So there's a contextual website called the Finnegans Wake Extensible Elucidation Treasury, which breaks down everything about the wake. And he mentioned this. I was in a call with him the other day, and he mentioned this. So I appreciate that, Raphael Slapon of Flute. I'll link to that in the show notes as well. So we get a sense that the dream is starting to break up. Not that it's really going to make much of a difference in terms of what we understand, but the first few lines of this are on that. The other thing that happens in this chapter is that this is the section that contains the lines that were musically adapted by John Cage in the 1940s, and then were later performed by Joey Ramone. So Joey Ramone. So just to give you a sense.
Night by silent sailing night. Is open, wildwood eyes and primrose hair.
So there's Joey Ramone getting all abstract on us, and that was the song that actually inspired our friend Tommy Mackay to create his Finnegans Wake Ramones Stramash-up album. So I love it when I guess I wanted to point it out because I love it when inspiration comes from like a really obscure set of lines or something pulled out like 600 pages into a book, not on page 3 or something like that. So that was called that's called The Wonderful Widow of 18 Springs, and so that's a line that comes up on page 556. So those are a little bit of contextual things before we jump in. But let's jump into the chapter. So as always, we're reading from the Penguin Modern Classics edition of Finnegans Wake, published in 2000 with a foreword by Seamus Dean. Today we'll be reading the first part of chapter 3-4, the final chapter in book 3, from pages 555 to 572 in this edition. This segment has an incredibly detailed title. We've had some long ones in the past, but in this case, the elevator pitch for this chapter kind of assumes we're going to the very top of a very tall building. So here's the summary, and this never mind the actual details of the chapter. This chapter is called Dawn, an intensely structured chapter and a shift, relatively speaking, from the surrealism of all that's gone before to a degree of realism. We seem to float with two narrators through the chapel is at night, describing the small sleeping inhabitants, the porters, and others, all versions of characters already encountered. A small nocturnal domestic drama unfolds. One of the twins, Jerry, wakes. His mother soothes him back to sleep. The parents have sex. Dawn approaches. The husband slumbers, anxious with money problems. The chapter rotates around 4 points of view, camera positions signaled by 4 musical chords. So see if you can pick all that out. Thus says the Oxford World's Classic edition of 2012, which also includes brief summaries of what's happening in each subsection, which we will address at the end of the reading. And now, finally, without further ado, Finnegans Wake. What was thus? Fog was was. Tumult sleep. Let sleep. But really now whenabouts? Expatiate then how much times we live in, yes? So nat by night, by naught by naked, in those good old lousy days gone by, the days, shall we say, of whom shall we say? While kinderwardens minded their twins' bed, there now they stood, thy sophomores, all 4 of them, in their quartan agues, the Majorque, the Minorque, the Everso, and the Fermentarian, with their ballyhuric blow-reaper, titrenicked by tetranoxed, at their pussy corners, at that old-time paleoglass, playing Cooper's fearsome, with Gus Walker, the cuddy, and his poor old dying Boosie cough, Esker, Nuxel, Sagard, Crumlin, Delmy, Donk, the way to Wumblin. Follow me, beeline, and you're bumbling, Esker, Nuxel, Sagard, Crumlin, and listening. So gladdied up when nice child Kevin Mary, who was going to be a commandeering chief of the Choir Boys Brigade the moment he grew up under all the auspices. Irish smiled in his milky way of cream dwibble, and onage tustard and dest cabbaged, frighted out when a bad brat Jerry Godolphin, who was hurrying to be Cardinal Scullion and a night refuge as bald as he was cured enough under all the hospitals, Furrenfrau down his wrinkly waste of methylated spirits, ick and melancholy lease, ick and pulverized rhubarb barorum icky. Night by silent sailing night, with infantella Isobel, who will be blushing all day to be, when she growed up one Sunday, Saint Holy and Saint Ivory, when she took the veil, the beautiful presentation nun, so barely 20, in her pure coif, Sister Isabel, and next Sunday, Misselmass, when she looked a peach, the beautiful Samaritan, still as beautiful and still in her teens, Nurse Saintette Isabel, with stiff starched cuffs, but on holiday, Christmas, Easter mornings, when she wore a wreath, the wonderful widow of 18 Springs, Madame Isa Verve La Belle, so sad but luxem in her boy blues long black, with orange blossoming weeper's veil. For she was the only girl they loved, as she is the queenly pearl you prize, because of the way the night that first we met she is bound to be, methinks, and not in vain, the darling of my heart, sleeping in her April cot, within her singer chamber, with her green gage flavoured candy whistle duetted to the crazy quilt. Isabel, she is so pretty, truth to tell, wildwood's eyes and primrose hair, quietly, all the woods so wild, in mauves of moss and daphne dews, how all so still she lay, neath of the white thorn, child of tree, like some lost happy leaf, like blowing flower stilled, as fain would she anon, for soon again 'twill be, win me, woo me, wed me, ah, weary me, deeply, now even calm, lay sleeping.
Knelt upon knocked, while in his tumbrel Walkman have a look, see queer scenes from yon sides of the choppy, punked by his coarser blog, went long the grass gross bump in strass that hinders the pubble to pass, stowing his bottle in a hole, for at wet his waskel to stretch e crooksman, sequestering for lovers lost. Propertied offices, the leave things from all purgers night, og, niece, ogas, nasty, kickers, brillers, nappers, and bands, hands, boon, and strumpers, sminky sticks, and edic flaskers. One fine night, and the next fine night, and last fine night, while Catherine the slop, in her native's chamber cushy, with dreamings of simmering my veal astore, was basking to her pill asleep, how she thought a knog came to the down a stairs dower at that hour to pierce the air, and down she went. Scrict be scracked to see was it Schweeps Minnegrowls or Shoehorn the Post, with a tilly cramp for himself and co, Esquara, or them 4 horsemen on their Apolcaloops, Norries, Soothbys, Yates, and Welks, and glory bit of the Saints in Hevel. There was a crick up the Sturkis, and when she ruz the cankle to see, Gallow Harry down and she went on her knees to bless herself that were nogging together like milk juggles, as if it was the rake of the Hap Spruce, or old Kong Gander O'Toole of the mountains, or his goo-goo goose she seein' sliving off over the sawdust lobby out of the back room. Wan Tur, that was everyone's in Turins, in his honeymoon trim, holding up his finger hulls with the clukie in his fistball, talker of Davies, talker of Ivelay, for her to whilst you sow-belly, and the whites of his pious eyebulbs, swearing her to silence and court. Each and every judicial sessions night, when as goodmen 12 and true at fox and geese in their numbered habitations, tired old wireless overboard in their jurum members, whereas by referendum they found him guilty of their and those imputations of fornicopulation with 2 of his albocrural correlations, on whom he was said to have enjoyed by anticipation, when schooling them in Ammon, mid-grass she sat, when man was amazingly frank, for their first conjugation, whose colours at standing up from the above were of a pretty carnation, but, if really 'twere not so, of some deritane denudation with intent to excitation, caused by his retrogradation among firearmed forces to proper to this nation, but apart from all titillation, which, he said, was under heat, pressure, and a good mitigation, without which in any case he insists upon being worthy of continued alimentation. For him having displayed, he says, such grand toleration, retrobate, so noted and all as he was, with his wash leather Swedes and his smoking stump, for denying transubstantiation, nevertheless, in respect of his high-powered station, whereof more especially as probably he was meantime suffering genteel tortures from the best medical attestation, as he oftentimes did, having only strength enough, by way of festination, to implore, or, I believe you might have said better, to complore, with complete obsecration on everybody connected with him, the curse of coagulation. For he tells me outside Salmon's in King Street, after 2 or 3 hours of close confabulation, by this pewter pint of Gilby's goatsway, which is his prime consolation, albeit involving upon the same no uncertain amount of esophagus regurgitation, he being personally unpreoccupied to the extent of a flea's gizzard anent eructation. If he was still extremely offensive to a score and 4 nostrils dilation, still he was likewise, on the other side of him, for some Neppin's eyes a delectation, as he asserts without the least alienation, so praise of his fault you would make obliteration, but for our friend behind the bars. Though, like Adam Findlater, a man of estimation, summing him up to be done, be what will of excess his exaltation, still we think with Sully there can be no right extenuation for contravention of common and statute legislation, for which the fit remedy resides. For Mr. Sully, in corporal amputation, so 3 months for Gubbs Jeroboam, the froth-whiskered pest of the park, as per Act 1, Section 2, Schedule 3, Clause 4 of the 5th of King Jark, this sentence to be carried out tomorrow morn by Nolans Bolans at 6 o'clock shark, and may the yeast wind and the hoppin' hail malt mercy on his 7 honey meads and his hurly-burly growth. Amen, says the clerk. Niece by nice, by neat, by natty, whilst amongst reveries happy gardens 9 with 20 slippery earnings, darters all, had such a ripping time with gleeful cries of what is nice topping Sean made of maid for, and weeping like fun, him to be gone, for they were never happier, hoo-hoo, than when they were miserable, ha-ha. In their bed of trial, on the bolster of hardship, by the glimmer of memory, under coverlets of cowardice, Albatross Nyanza with Victa Nyanza, his mace of might mortified, her beautiful hung up on a nail. He, Mister of our fathers, she, our moderine rue, they I by the haughty poker and blazer, they are, as sure as Dinny drops into the dike, a cry off.
Where are we at all? And when about in the name of space? I don't understand, I failed to say. I dear see you too. House of the Cinderbomb of Mead, Garth of Fion, scene and property plot, stage manager's prompt, interior of dwelling, on outskirts of city, Grove 2, chamber scene, boxed, ordinary bedroom set, salmon-papered walls, back, empty Irish grate, Adam's mantle, with wilting implement fan, soot and tinsel condemned. North, wall with window particularable, Argentine encasement, vamp, pelmet above, no curtains, blind drawn, south, party wall, bed for 2 with strawberry bedspread, wicker worker, club Cecil with cannon-seated Milkian stool, Bookshire without, face towel upon, chair for 1, woman's garments on chair, man's trouser with cross-belt bracers, collar on bed knob, man's corduroy surcoat with tabrets and taces, C-pan, narke buttons on nail, women's gown on ditto, over mantelpiece picture of Michael, Lance, slaying Satan, dragon with smoke, small table near bed, front, bed with bedding, spare, flag patch quilt, Yever down design, limes, lighted lamp with without globe, scarf, gazette, tumbler, quantity of water, jewel pot, ticker, side props, eventuals, man's gummy article, pink, a time, act, dumb show, close up, leads, man with nightcap in bed, 4, woman with curl pins, hind, discovered, side point of view, first position of harmony, say, eh, ha, check action, mat, male partly masking female, man looking round, beastly expression, fishy eyes, paralipped homoplats, gazometron pondus, exhibits rage, business, ruddy blonde, Armenian bowl, black patch, beer wig, gross build, Episcopalian, any age, woman, sitting, looks at ceiling, haggish expression, peaky nose, trecate mouth, firthy weight, exhibits fear, Welsh rabbit tint, Nubian shine, nasal foreset, turfy tuft, undersized, free kirk, no age, close up, play, cowboy, cry off, tabler, her move, footage, by the sinewy forequarters of the mare Pocahontas, and by the white shoulders of Fenelon, you should have seen how that smart sallow lass just hopped on Nanny's gambit out of bunk like old mother Mesopotamic, and in 864 she was off door, night lamp with her, Billy's large limbs proggering after the queen's lead. promiscuous, promiscuous, armbound to Famalel La Diva, Huff, his move, blackout, circus, corridor.
Shifting scene. Walls flats, sink and fly. Spotlight working wall cloths. Spill playing rake and bridges. Room to sink, stairs to sink behind room. 2 pieces. Hang after cue. Replay. The old Hamburg looks a thing incomplete, so it is so. On its dead. But it will pawn up a fine head of porter when it is finished. In the quick time, the castle Arkwright put in a checkered staircase, certainly. It has only 1 square step to be steady, not yet, not with stumbling, as they stalemating backgammoners upstairs by skips and trestles till top double corner. Whist, guile, and game. What scenic artist! It is ideal resident for realtor. By hymns in gang, tilt, tunk, tinkt, a tunning bell that Lyman mister that boggy god be air-waked. Ling, 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 be there Maggies and all. Chump, do your effort. Shop, please shop. Shop, ado, please. Oh, ado, please shop. How ominous his house haunted. Yeses, indeed it be. No gen of imperial measure is begraved beneath her. Here are his naggins poured, his Aladdin lamps, around the bloombeard booty with the best. For them whom he have fordone make we newly thankful. Tell me something. The porters, so to speak, after their shadow stealers and the newsbaggers, are very nice people, are they not? Very, all 4 like telt. And on this wise, Mr. Porter, Bartholomew, heavy man, astern, mackerel shirt, Hayamat peruke, is an excellent forefather, and Mrs. Porter, leading lady, a pooper head, Gaffney saffron nightdress, is hoppy chapeleur, is a most kind-hearted messmother. A so united family pateramater is not more existing on papal or off of it. As Keymaster fits the lock, weds, so this bally builder onto this streamlined secret. They care for nothing except everything that is all porterous. Porto d'Abruzzo! Isn't that terribly nice of them? You can ken that they come of a rarely old family by their costumance, and one must give that one supped of it in all tone arts from ore to zest. I think I begin to divine so much. Only snackst me truesome. I stone us, I'm Hable. To reachia skiadoo. Still hoira till venstra. Here are 2 rooms on the upstairs, at fork flank and at knife canter. Whom in the wood are they for? Why, for little porter babes to be saved. The coeds, boy tom, thwackers, and timby teaser. Here is one thing you owed to know. Here, this one, once upon a while, was the other, but this is the other one nowadays. Ah, so, the Corsicos, they are numerable. Guess them. Major bed, minor bickhive, Hazelobuth, Sovas. Who sleeps in now number 1, for example? A pussy, per example. Cunina, Statulina, and a Julia, but how sweet of her. Has your pussy a pest name? Yes, indeed. You will hear it passum in all the noveletta, and she is named Buttercup. Her bare name will tell it, a monitress. How very sweet of her, and what an excessively love-charming missy name for forsake, now that I come to drink of it filtered, a grace cup filled of bitterness. She is Dadad's lottiest daughter-pearl, and Bruder's sissiest auntie-bride. Her shell-back thimble casket mirror can only show her dearest friendine. To speak well her grace, it would ask of Grecian language, of her goodness, that legend golden. Biriana Saint-Dua, Laureus with Lilius Flocaflake Arosus. Here's New Year's spray, the posquiv floor, a winterborn and heliotrope. There Miriam sweet and amaranth and marigold to crown. Add lightest not unto Tippiton. O Charis, O charisma, a more intriguant bambolina could one not colour up out of Baruch's enamorin. Would one but to do apart a lilybit her virginelles, and so to breath, so there between, behold, she had instant with her handmaid as to graps the myth in mid the air. Mother of moth, I will to show her word in flesh. Approach not for the ghost's sake, it is dormition. She may think what though little doth she realise, as morning fresheth, it hath happened her, you know what, as they two what do dare not utter. Silvu plush, if scolded she draws a face. Petticoats asleep, but in the gentlest of her thoughts, Apu is a nurse-pin. To be presented Babs for Bimbushi, of courts and with entices. Up, girls, and at him. Alone? Alone what? I mean, our strife stirrer. Does she do flirty winkies with herself? Pussy is never alone, as records her chambred, for she can always look at Biddles and talk pet names with her play filly when she is sitting downy on the plosh mat. Oh, she talks, does she? Marry, how? Rose-petalled it sounds. Biddles es ma plick-plack. Plick-plack wed ma Biddles. A nice Jezebel Baritonette she will gift, but I much prefer her misnomer and maidenly golden lass like gladsome wenchful flowery girlish beauty capes. So do I much. Dolce delicatissima. Doth Dolly weeps she is Hastings. Will Dally bump Setty, it is tub time. Al ailey fest, she who pities very pebbles, dare we not wish on her our thrice onks? A lovely fear, that she seven-tip-toe her chrisming, that she spin blue to scarlad till her temples veil, that the mount of Huam it open her to shelter her. She will blow ever so much more promisefuller, bleamy, than all the other common merry-gales that romp around Bridget School. Charming Carrie Wombers, or saucy Susie Morsepan, of Merry Anna Patchbox, or silly Polly Flinders. Platch! Plick-a-plack!
And since we are talking amnesty of Bruxaloop crazadilla days who doze in a sleep room number 2 biz, the two birds, holy policemen, oh, I see! Of what age are your birdies? They are to come of twinning age so soon as they may be born to be elderling like those olders while they are living under chairs. They are, and they seem to be so tightly detached as two maggots to touch other. I think I notice. Do I not? You do. Our bright bull babe Frank Kevin is on heart sleeve side. Do not you waken him. Our far head bowed, he is happy to sleep, limb of the Lord, with his lifted in blessing, his buckle iosa, like the blessed angel he looks so like, and his mow is semiope, as though he were blow-delling on a bew-giggle. Whene'er I see those smiles and eyes, 'tis Father Quinn again. Very shortly he will smell sweetly when he will hear a weird to wean. By gorgeous, that boy will blare some night when he will take his Dane's pledges and quit our Ingleteers, spite of undesirable parents, to wend him to Amorica to quest a cashy job. That keen dean with his veen nonchalance, oh, I adore the profane music. Dollar mighty, he is too adorable, really unique. I guess to have seen some kid like him in the storybook. Guess I met somewhere some lamb to whom he will be becoming liker. But hush, how unpardonable of me. I beg for your venials, sincerely I do. Hush. The other, twined on cod liver side, has been crying in his sleep, making sharp shape his incisors on some first choice sweets fished out of the muck. A stake in our mead! What a teething wretch! How his book of craven images! Here are posthumous tears on his intimel, and he has pippitishly bespilled himself from his founding's pen, as ill spent from inking lorn. He is Jem, Job, Joy, Pip, Poo, Pat, Jot, for a sobrat, Jerry Jehu. You will know him by name in the capers, but you cannot see whose heel he sheepfolds in his wrought hand, because I have not told it to you. Oh, fetal sheep, ah, fatal slip, the one loved, the other left, the bride of pride least to the stranger. He will be quite within the pale when his lord Biron brow he vows him so toss it, to be of the Sir Blake tribes bleak, while through life's unblessed he roads backs of Banars. Are you not somewhat vulgar with your bowels? Whatever do you mean with bleak? With pale Blake I write tinting face. Oh, you do? And with steel white and blackmail I ha signed for my sweet an anemone's letter with a gold of my bridest hair bettied? Donatus his mark, address as follows. So you did. From the cat and cage, oh, I see and see. In the ink of his sweat he will find it yet, what gypsy Devereux vowed to Lillian, and why the elm and how the stone. You never may know in the to write all perhaps that you would not believe that you ever even saw to be about to. Perhaps. But they are two very blitzky little porterines after their bed scrums, jerk off, and eats up. As for my part opinion indeed, they would be born so, co-starred Puck and Prig, the merry boy at Donnybrook Fair, the Godolphin lad in the Hoy's court. How thrilled one shall be as at tale told of Formigo and Cigalette. What folly, innocence! There's wet pep of puppyhood. Both barm hearts shall become yeast cake by their break fast. I will to leave my copperwise blessing between the pair of them for Rosengorge, for Greenafang, Bleck and Tinsoldies, wheels in a sniff box, Psalms hold, all's parted. Weeping shouldst not thou be when man falls, but the divine scheming ever adoring be. So you be either man or mouse, and you be neither fish nor flesh. Take and to take. Velicate Nike. Be ones as Wes forgives now the hour of passings, sembles quick with quelled. Adieu, soft adieu, for these nice presents, carry Jevin, still to sorrow.
Jiminy, what is the view which now takes up a second position of discordance? Tell it, please. Mark, you notice it in that way because the male entail particularly eclipses the feminine covet. It is so called for its discord and me-see-do. Do you ever heard the story of Helios Corius, that white and gold elephant in our zoo park? You astonish me by it. It is not that we are commanding from full back woman permitting a profusely fine bird's eye view of behind this park. Finn, his park has been much the admiration of all the stranger ones, Gurkish and Romanos, who arrive to hear. The straight road down the center, see relief map, bisects the park, which is said to be the largest of his kind in the world. On the right prominence confronts you the handsome Vine Regent's Lodge, while, turning to the other supreme piece of cheeks exactly opposite, you're confounded by the equally handsome chief sanctuary's residence. Around is a little amiably toughed, and man is cheered when he bewounds through the boscage how the nature and all Frisco is enlivened by gentlemen's seats. Here are heavy suppers. 'Tis for daddy's housings, for hundred heirs of our super thin thousand. By gum, but you have resin. Of these tall warts are yielded out juices for joint toils and passes for pinims. Listeneth, 'tis a tree story. How Olev that Feral was a planted in her live side. How Tannenboom held Tannen Bloom. How rude and Norlanders, the black and blue marks athwart the weld, which now barely is so stripped, indicate the presence of Sylvia's beltings. Therewithal, shady rides lend themselves out to rustic calvaries. In yonder valley, too, stays mountain sprite. How pretty deers are to be caught inside, but it is a bad pities of the plain. A scarlet pimpernel now moles the mound where anciently first murders were wanted to take root. By feud Forngehallen, talking tree, and singing stone stay on either hand. Historically, leaves droppings may also be garnered up with Sir Seamus Swiftpatrick, Archfield Chaplain of St. Lucian's. How familiar it is to see all these interesting evenements with no snaked eyes. Is all? Yet not. Here's one. At the boredom fundus of his royal park, which, with Tevagate Shisan Gardening is open to the public till night at late. So well the sister tides, so well the pedestrians. Do not fail to point to yourself a depression called Hull Hollow. It is often quite gutter glooming and our dual and gives Wekiyora's thoughts to be heard, but the banders of the Petropolian Pol Polites for chorus bassoons into it on windy woodness days into boomings wolvertones. Olvus, where Volk Dorst to't began to tremble by our moving pictures at this moment when I am to place my hand on our true friend shapes upon thee knee to mark well what I say? Through Shayest who? In Amsterdam there lived a but how? You are trembloting, you wretched like you wretchard like a very jelly. Niet? Will you Geneseer? Gaja bottle of Staub. To feel you? Yes, how it trembled. The timid. Vortigern, Gortigern, Overlord of America, or doth Brainskin Flitchgriff, Stemming. What boys a hessness, soul shadow shows. 'Tis just Jabberwock's joke. It must have soul. Oh, Kevin silence both. Put Shama Ryu. I have heard her voice somewheres else before me in these ears still that now that are for mine.
Led up, slew muses, thunner in the ire. You a dream end, dear? The paw drag? The fourth rig? Shoo! Here are no fanfares in the room at all, Everkeen. No bad bold father and dear one. Oh, pop capallo, muy malinchili malchick. Goth gorod, father go down, fell away to Mallow, the lucky load to Lublin, for make his thorough brass gross man's bigness. Take that two-piece big slaps bowl, little haunty bottom side, papa. Lini dormes? Malbone dormes. Kia li curious nicte? Parolus invadese. It's only all in your imagination, Dim. Poor little brittle magic nation, dim of mind. Shew to me now, dear, shew of me, while every stream winds sailing on for to keep this barrel of bounty rolling in the 9 mile afar from morning nears. When you're coaching through Leucolicid on the sulphur spar to visit, it's safer to hit than miss it, stop it as in. The hammers are telling the cobbles, the picks are hacking the Saxons. It's snugger to borrow a bed than ballet on Broadway. Tuck in your blank, for it's a race the hosties, rear all roads to ruin and layer as by lifetimes laid down riches from poormen. Cried unions to chip, salt pitted to strew, gold pitch to drink, stone bread to break, but it's bully to gulp good blueberry pudding. Doze in your warmth, while the elves in the moonbeams feeling why will keep my lily gem gently gleaming. In the sleeping chambers, the court to go into half mourning, the 4 seneschals with their palfrey to be there now, all balloming in their celibats and sharping up their penisals, the both Ivor Sokasone at hold up tent sticker, the swab's sister Katya to have done talking and to keep shakening down her drogadars. Those 12 chief barons to stand by Dua Dismally with their folded arms and put down all excursions and false alarms, and after that, to go back now to their Runnymede farms and recompile their magnum charterums with the width of the road between them and all harems. The maid brides all in favours gay to strew sleety cinders on their falling hair, and for would-be joybills to wring sadly ringless hands. The dame dowager to stay kneeled how she is, at first Merthera with cord in coil. The two princes of the Tower Royal, Dauphin and Devlin, to lie how they are without to see. The Dame Dowager's Duffregent to present weapon, blade drawn to the full, and about wheel without to be seen of them. The infant Isabella from her coin to do obeisance towards the Duffregent, as first featherer with drawn brand. Then the court to come in to full mourning. Herein see ye fail not.
Vidu porcego, illivi regardas, returnu porcego, maledictato. Gauze off heaven, vision then, O pluxty sudly, the sight entrancing, hummels that crag, those hullocks, O sire, so be accident occur, is not going to commence. What have you therefore? Fear you the donkers of roovers? I fear lest we have lost ours, not grant it, respecting these wildy parts. How is hit finister? How shagsome all and beastful? What do you show on? I show because I must see before my misfortune, so a stark pointing pole. Lord of ladders, what for longitude? Can you read the versed legend hereon? I am Hather of the Mist. A reed to the Dunleary obelisk via the rock, Vat miles knocks furlongs, to the General's Post Office house hands of patience, to the Wellington Memorial half a league wrongwards, to Sarah's Bridge, good hunter and 9 to meet her. To the point, 1 yeoman's yard, he, all that do you leer, a setting up, with a such unfettered belly, 2 cascades, I leer, oh my big, oh my bog, oh my bagbone, because I must see a bunting cap of so a pinky on the point. It is for a true glover's greetings, and many burgesses by us, greats and grosses, uses to pink it in this way a tete, for long has it been effigy of standard royal when broken on roof staff, which to the gunnings shall cast welcome from Court Millet's fortress, umpty-dum, dumpty-dum. Bemark you these hangovers, those streamer fields, his influx. Do you not have heard that the queen, lying abroad from fury of the gales, meek name mock titles her nanetta, her liege of 18th dignesties shall come on their bay tomorrow, Michaelmas, Mellums the 3rd and 4th of the clock, there to all the king's Aussies and all their king's men, next tramplers and cavalcaders, led of Harold Greycloak, Olaf Goldarskild, dog, her lofts will be loosed for her and their tumblers brood cast. A progress shall be made in walk, nay, I trow it well, by Uj and Uj. He shall come, sidesman accostant, by Aryan Jubilarian, and on Brigadier General Nolan Orr and Buccaneer Admiral Brown, with, who can doubt it, his golden beagles and his white Elcox terriers, for a hunting on our little ago ill-come faxes. In blue and buff of Beaufort the hunt shall make. It is publess noblige. Will grin through collars when each rider's others ass. Me eccles, what cat's killings over all, what popping out of guillotined widows. Quick time, beware of waiting. Squintina plies favors on us from her rush frail, and Zosimus the Crowder in his surcoat soothes us with southwister. Apart we, here are gantlets. I believe by plentyfolks mixy most. Yet if I durst to express the hope how I might be able to present all these peoplers entrammelled and detrained on bikey-gels and troy-calacs and those puny farting little solitires. Tallacre, Polo North will be Seam Cibernian, and Pline Paluta will be Howl, ni yerking at Lons Castrum, ni gimbling on Guelflinks. Mouser Miasma shall cease to stretch her and come aboard, for what the Blinkins is to be seen. A ruber, a rancher, a full vide, a veridust as credulous behind as he was before behind a damson of a slow cooch. Mv. The animation of Evabuses, the liveliness of her laughings, Such a plurality of bells have peasants, pray you, place to dames, even the Lady Victoria Landowner will leave to lull and parasol, all giddied into gush gasps, with her dikey standing. Brightus and Gothius shall no more joustle for that son a place, but mark one atonement when, with sea so silent, Claudia dual kiss, good and dued up, shall let fall yes, no, yet, now, a rain. Mucius grapsius. It is how sweet from her the wispful, and they are soon seen swapsib, so a sautril as a mise. It's ist not the tear on this movement sped, tick suspense, palm, hool, pole the bull, fool pay the bill, be cups a can full, peal pull the bell, still sayem of ceremonies much, much more. So please your, it stands in instopressible how Mainher Mayor, our Burgomaster, thon staunch Thorsman, our Nancy's fancy, our own Nanny's Big Billy, his hod hoisted in best bib and tucker, with Woolington booties over buckram babishkes, and his clouded cane and neck noose oriole, surrounded of his full cooperation with fixed baronets, and Meng our pueblos, restrained by a chain of hands from Pinchgut, Hog Hill, Dark Lane, Gibbet Mead and Bow and Lads and Bumbley shall receive Dom King at Broadstone Barrow, meet a keys of good morrow on to his Pompey cushion.
Me, ample duty to your graces, majors. Arise, Sir Pomkey, Domkey, ear, weak ear, and allness eversides. We but miss the horse elder yet, churchant off the wise Gravleek and Caberchin garden. That his be foison old Combine Hobbin. 'Twill be tropic of all days, by the splendor of soul, perfect weathering prevailing. This after, Swift's might mace deposing, he shall airdress to his serenmost by the speech reading from his miniated vellum. Aleph, Byron, Gammon, Deltar, etc., Zizera, Ekal, Iakla, Trekla, Yogata, Coptor, Lomdom, no. Whom meanwhile that illuminated one, Papoi Roy of Pepin Rain, my sire, great big king, his scaffold is there set up as to edify by Rex Ingram, pageant master, will be poking out with his cannula into the hours of with what brilliant bright clothes, and joking up with his tongue spritz to the crimsoning Balkan ladies. Here's a help undo their modest stays with a full bellow. May the funny feel belong. Odds bones, that may it. Caroloners will ring their Gluckspiels. Rung, 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 rung. S. Presbutt in the north, S. Mark Underloop, S. Lorenz by the toll chest, S. Nicholas Meyer. You shall hark the Anon S. Gardner, S. George L. Greek, Le Greek, S. Barclay Motorid, S. Fib, Iona in the fields with Paul the Apostle, and Adulterand, S. Jude at gate, Bruno Ferris, S. Wesleyan on the row, S. Molyneux without, S. Mary still marries, with bride and a Duus behind Warbolg. How chimnit in effort, Allen tingling pelabels. So a many of churches one cannot pray owns prayers. 'Tis Holly's year day. June, July, we may. Agathia of and Tranquilla shall demur unclaused, but Marlborough the less, great Christ and holy protector, shall have open vigilances. Betcha beta basilica, but will be not pontification? Doc again, primatelli at Wateredge, Cantabera and New York may supplicate when, by vespers, vepers, for town and travelled, his gold white sway stick aloft ye lifted, umbrella parasol, Monsieur of Dablon shall impart to all, Benedictus benedict, to board, and meal sight. Unjoint him this bittern, first me this chicken, display yon crane, thigh her pigeon, unlace alley rabbit and pheasant. Sing, old fillin cool, he's a mellow old soul when he swills with his fuddles free. Papap awry, for we're in all jolly game, fell hellos which non-bottle can deny. Here be trouts, copond for ye, and salmons chined, and sturgeons tranched, saunched capons, lobsters barbed. Call Halton eat words. Me mo mummers. What? No Ithalians? How? Not all pommels? Accordingly, play actors by us ever have crashed to their gate. Mr. Mesop and Mr. Bory will produce of themselves as their two gentile men of Verono, uh, Senior Nalno and Senior Borolano. Finally, all for love of a fair pennant that, as she be Boroton, Rhoda's a rose she. There, two big skins. How they strave to get her. Such a boy play. Their bociculture. What tyrannute power. By our phase. My name is Novel and the Granby and Hills. Bravoso, thou traitor slave. My name's Apanoval, and o'er the grand beyond mountains. Bravio most. The royal Noisic their show shall shut with song slide to nature's solemn silence. Deep Dolce Dolond. Might gentle harp adurgi? It will give pike turns to the tumble limplads and foran dances and cross huddles and doll manovers and vice vicious pyrolithics, a snow of dawn flakes, a dark fall for graces, mammistry, and our fancy ladies, all assombred. Some whole time in hot town tonight. You do not have heard? It stays in book of that which is. I have heard anyone till it yesterday, Master Courier with breasted wust, how one should come on morrow here, but it is never here that one today. Well, but remind to think, you were yesterdays, ye's Morgan's war, and that it is always tomorrow, and thought's place. Amen.
True. Vouchsafe me more sound picture. It gives furiously to think. Is rich Mr. Paunter, a squire, not always in his such strong health? I thank you for the best. He is in taken deal exceedingly Herculeneous. One sees how he is lots stoutlier than of formerly. One would say him to hold whole a littering cure of kidlings under his Abraham. Has handsome Sir Paunter always been so long married? Oh yes, Lord Paunter Familius has been marrying man ever since so long in Hurtleforth, where he appear as our oily the active. And yes, indeed, he has his Mike son and his two fine Mac sons, and a superfine Mick want they Mac between them. She, but on what do you again leer? I am not leering, I pink you pardons. I am highly serious. Do you not must want to go somewhere on the present? Yes, oh pity, at earliest moment, that prickly heat feeling. For think not me spill, it's always so dewy. Here we shall do a far walk, oh pity, any go, Cabits, till the number one of Sary's place. Is. I want you to admire her sceneries illustrationing our national first route, one. We shall two down look on that ford, where Sylvanus Sanctus wash, but hurdly those tips of his anointeds. Do not show ever retro see him, crocodiled, till that you become quite crimstone in the face. Beware, guard a few. It is stealer of the heart. I am anxious in regard you should ever throw in your sillisalt. I will dewy sui tef newt. Those brilling wavely blights. Please say me how sing you them. Seek him, they arise from a clear spring well in the near of our park, which makes the daft to hear all blend. This place of endearment, how it is clear, and how they cast their spells upon the fronds that there upfloat, the bookstaff branchings, the druggeted stems that the leaves incut on trees. Do you can their tantra spellings? I can least skill mistress aiding. Elm, bay, this way, dull dare. Take a message, tawny runes, ilex shallow. Meet me at the pine. Yes, they shall have brought us to the water trysting by hedges of maiden fern. Then here in another place is their chapel of eases, sold for song, of which you have thought my praise too much my price. Oh, ma, yes, sad one of Zyod, sell me my soul dear. Ah, my sorrowful, his cloister dreeping off his monk's hood, how it is tryst to death, all his dark ivy tod, where cold in dearth. Yet see my blanching Kissabel, in the underclose she is also gay, her kirtles green, her curtsies white, her peony pears, her nistling slows. I, pipette, I must also quicklingly detryst myself softly into this Littlest chapel. I would rather than Ireland. But pray, make, do your easiness, oh peace, this is heaven. O Mr. Prince of pouring to her, whatever shall please to do. Why do you so life-size, my precious, as I hear from you with lamentations after that swollen one? I am not sighing, I assure, but only I am so sorry about, all in my sourest place. Listen, I am doing it. Hear more to those voices. Always I am hearing them. Horsehem coughs enough, and she lisps privily.
He is quieter now. Legal entitled, access to partners, not wild beseech, by right of foapts, twain be honor flesh, heaven and hope. Let us go, make a noise, slee! Ki quai, the gur, whose fricked unfolden morn, wake up and rise and provide for sacrifice. Wait, hist, let us list, for our netherworld's bosom foes are working tooth and nail overtime in earth veins, toad cavities, cheese ganglions, salt clusters, underfed, nagging fire nibblers, knocking Aderman up out of his hinterclutch. Tomb be their tools, when the young dammers will be soon heart-pocking on their betters' door-knoggers. And the young fries will be back frisking diamond cuts over their line gin underlayers, spick and spat, trowling a graven trench for their four-in-hand forebears. Vote for your club! Wait, what? Her door! Ope! See! What? Careful! Who? Live well in Edelverta's tone.
Oh, yes. There we are.
So close.
That was the first part of chapter 3-4 from Finnegans Wake. Jay, how you feeling?
How am I feeling?
Yes, how are you feeling after all of that?
I am so enamored with this.
Amazing.
Because I'm sure I'm just about to repeat a bunch of stuff you've already spoken about and explored. But I grew up playing violin, and the particular training method that I was trained in, Suzuki, is all about listening. So you don't even learn to read music for the first several years. You just listen and you kind of repeat, what you've heard, and that's how you learn the song. And I've always taken that, like, as a writer, I'm so keyed into, I think that was such a formative experience as a young person to go listening that carefully, because it's not just about obviously like the note and getting the note right, but rhythm and cadence and pace and all of those things, tempo. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, really, really good writers, you see this in Shakespeare all the time. Like there's like obviously he's writing in meter, but to some extent, but it has its own meaning, and this is such a playful way, I think, of exposing some of the typically hidden layers of language, tone, rhythm, cadence. There is meaning, but it surfaces through the ways in which he is playing with and contorting and changing and upending our kind of conditioned sense of where meaning is meant to be, and so that is astonishing. I think the way in which Joyce has done this, and like it's obviously hard to try to kind of read and follow at the same time, or listen and follow at the same time. But I got this and there are certainly sections where I'm like, I would have to go back and read this, 12 more times to try to figure it out. But then you get into TJ read that bit about when he does for we're all jolly game fell hellos, which no bottle can. I'm like, right. Like instantly there's the song that we all are familiar with. We know, but the words have been ordered it's just been altered in a way that makes it mean differently. And that is a remarkable feat.
I think you hit on the thing that has been the most frustrating aspect for me in this experience, is the fact that I always feel like I am on the back foot of the joke or the spin or the pun, right? And so, in my head, I love the fact that you learned how to play violin that way, because that's how I learned how to sing in church choirs. Like, they didn't teach you how to read music. They were like, this is the note, sing the note, right? And this is how I take in music, right? And so I'm like, oh, cool. Now that I know what it is, there's always this desire for me to let me run that back. Let me get another chance at it. And the fact that the thing that we are doing is not to get another chance at it. And the second that I catch myself being like, I want another chance at that, my brain is thinking about the thing 7 lines ago. And I'm like, but I gotta keep going forward. And I feel my mouth just being like, no, you don't know what you're doing anymore. But I think it is that desire of like, I know what you're doing, and I kind of want to pay reverence to it by doing it right, whatever right is, air quotes, right? And being able to explore and open it up in that way. But that has been the continual frustration, is that when Toby's doing it and I can see the thing that like Toby might not have gotten, and when I'm in it, I'm like, gosh, I know that's not what that was, or that's not what that's supposed to be, but like, gotta let it go.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that this is meaningful in that sense, because it's true. There is meaning here. And one of the things that we've really come across throughout all of this is that it's not that there's no meaning, it's that there's too much meaning. There's so much meaning that you can get meaning in any different way, in 15 or different layers on any number of one word. And you can't look at it all at once. It's, it's holographic in that sense.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. I love that, holographic. Sorry. Yeah, there's something so 3-dimensional about it. But I think again, it arises by virtue of this notion of like language. The meaning that we derive from language is not just about a word. So a lot of what I was doing when I'm reading is like, I'm relying on syntax. I'm like, there's an order to words in a sentence that inherently makes sense to us. And so I'm inflecting not based on what I think the word necessarily means, but what I understand what I understand to be the order of the words, and that's just syntax. And so I'm inflecting based on an understanding of something that is not necessarily about what the actual word is saying. And then you add on, like, there were multiple times where I'm like, this is obviously meant to be read out loud. This is obviously meant to be read out loud by an Irish person, because he's also incorporating the way in which that dialect and the accent of the dialect inflects English. So you take what is traditionally, like, I'm going to say Gaelic, and that the musicality, the actual sound of the Gaelic accent when it's applied to English, he's actually merging the accent with the words, and that's part of how he's all. So again, all to say, like, that dimensionality comes from, okay, we're all hyper-focused on words and the meaning of words, but actually when you start to think about syntax, when you start to think about dialect and accent, when you start to think about, like, just musicality and music and the things that are familiar to us, and kind of just jarring them enough so that we have to look at them and think of them slightly differently, like, that's a beautiful accomplishment, is to, again, look at language as, like you said, like more of a hologram than a flat thing that is just on, like, something that we're so used to just reading off of a page.
My daughter is often trying to do accents, and she's 12, and she's always trying to do some different kinds of accents. And I have to say to her, it's not just about the sound of the word, but it's also the cadence of the sentence. And so often someone thinks I can just put on. It's why no one can do a good Australian accent, is because no one can get the cadence of the Australian accent right. They can get some of the sounds, but it always sounds wrong to an Australian ear. The same way, if we were to put on Irish accents, we would sound wrong to our Irish listeners, because it's about this this mellifluous way of. And so we many episodes ago we played an excerpt of Joyce reading Joyce, and it's very melodious, and it's very much that he's writing for a particular kind of tone, but is also writing for, like, a West Country accent, even though he was a Dubliner. It's very, 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 very interesting.
I think about whenever an artist or a band will take someone else's song and put their cadence and style on it, right? It's the same words, but it changes the interpretation of the meaning song completely, right? There's this really nice version that I'll probably send y'all a link to of Prince's I Would Die For You. And it stops being this, like, raucous, like, love anthem and becomes this, like, really sweet, deep sentiment about affection in a way that I was like, oh, this song blows up in a completely different way. And this book is in that same method, which is why one of the joys that I have on this podcast is listening to Toby just read it, because Toby just reads fantastically, and he's a savant in that way, and I hate him for it. But also having other people come on and, like, put their interpretation and the way and their cadence on it, and it illuminates something for me every time. So.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was great to hear you reading, Jason, because it was just it was your personality in there, and I really saw how you got comfortable in your first couple paragraphs. You were, like, feeling it out, but then by the time you got into your second and third segments, I was like, oh, there he is. There's the Swedish chef. I will also say before we go on that holographic line, I was just trying to figure out where I got it from. That's not my line. That's actually a perspective on Finnegans Wake, first floated by Philip K. Dick, a legend in the sci-fi community, and also a great Finnegans Wake lover. But the holographic, so that is definitely not my idea. That is Philip K. So the other thing that I noticed, which was the most. It's kind of spooky. It's kind of spooky to me that this came up. So Jason, I probably would have asked you on the podcast 2 months ago, but we only just reconnected last month, and we connected, and I asked you to, and we had a Zoom call a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you really need to come on the podcast. And then by the time we got everything organized, we managed to set it up so that we were doing this in Book 3, Chapter 4, Part 1. Just happened to. And then at the beginning of this section, you said, this makes me think of the Jabberwocky and it makes me think of when I used to use the Jabberwocky as my thing. And then this is the section that has one of two references to the Jabberwocky in the entire book. So on page 565, there is a reference to Jabberwocky. Tis jest Gibberweek's joke. So, like, to go, the fact that from we managed to get you in at this point in the reading, and then you mentioned totally unprompted that you used to use the Jabberwocky, and then this is one of two sections in the entire book where the Jabberwocky is mentioned, kind of blows my mind a little bit. Okay, the Matrix is messing with us right now.
There was some, I wanted to just quickly follow up something that TJ said, which is, because there's the other dimension of reading reading quietly versus reading aloud. And the fact that requires different cognitive processes. So I think he's also messing with our sense of like, is a book meant to be a thing that we take away and we isolate ourselves? It's very personal, deep consciousness experience versus something that we read aloud, whether to our own ears or to other people's ears, because and in fact, that is a piece of advice that I give whenever I teach writing workshops is at a certain point, we all know what it's like to lose perspective on our material. You spend months and months working on a thing, and at a certain point, you're just like, I don't even know anymore. I can't see this critically. And one great way of jarring yourself out of that is to read it out loud, because a different part of your brain will kick in, and it will allow you to hear it and even see the words differently. And that's an incredibly useful thing to do. And in fact, it just felt like Joyce is intentionally, this feels like a challenge to the reader to speak this text, not just to sit silently, try to process it.
There are a lot of stories. I mean, by the time Joyce finished writing this, he was just essentially blind, and so he was writing this by hand, and then he was getting it transcribed by a secretary, who would then, to her best of her ability, would try to interpret his handwriting, and. Right. Sometimes she would not be able to interpret what he'd written, so she would just fill in what she thought it might be, and then he would read it back, and sometimes he'd be like, oh, that's actually better than what I had, and it would stay in there, because he was all about almost like pulling at the thread, of the embroidery behind it, just to sort of fray every single word, to try to find each word to get the best kind of meaning, the most deep meaning. Maybe there's a better way of saying it, and he'd ask people, he'd say, this is the word I'm using, is there a better word for this that would be a better pun or a better... It was very collaborative in that sense, and it was very much about, okay, I want to say this word, but I'm going to corrupt it to a point where you can almost hear the echo of the original word in there, but it's not that word anymore, and it's telling you three other different kinds of things. Which is a fascinating way in. And again, if you're not reading it aloud, then how do you get that interpretation? I mean, I don't know. I mean, did you feel like you got much meaning out of it? Or was it just sort of like, sometimes we've described it like trying to read a book in a lightning storm, where sometimes, there'll be a flash of light and you'll see it and go, oh, there it is. Did you get a sense of much meaning?
Yeah, I would sign on to the lightning flash, but I think it was. I mean, it was when we say like, did I glean insights of meaning? I mean, I think yes, but also a variety of different types of meaning. Sometimes it was the feeling of like, oh, again, this I think what you perceive as my comfort was my brain going, oh, there's still syntax. Like you can rely on the structure of sentences, even if the individual words are challenging or strange or weird. And so that was a part of the comfort, is going like, oh, I know how to read a sentence. I know how to speak. And so rather than try to focus on like, am I getting tripped up on the words? Am I saying this correctly or whatnot? Because that would just be the practice of it, would just be that you could refine your, again, what TJ is saying, the challenge of this is going like, I only have one shot. There's no rehearsals. Like, this is the performance. Yeah. But there's also something that reminds me of when I did learn to read music, and I could actually just take a piece of sheet music and learn it on the violin. And usually I would just mark through it once, right? Like you go through, you're like, obviously, like I know what the notes mean. I know how to play them, but for lack of any type of process, I'm going to have to learn something differently from this And this is not about like having the most polished possible version. This is about learning how to mark your way through a text. And that's a fascinating thing to do with this. But then every so often, it would hit you like, again, that line about the for he's a jolly good fellow, which in this text is the, I just lost it but there's the song. You're like, oh, there's that familiar song that we all know and we've all sung at some party or another that he's got in here and he's fucking with it for we're all jolly game fell hellos, which no bottle, like, so there's those moments. And then there were just other moments where it just felt like, I think in my first section, I was like, there is a very particular cadence to this. He's doing the shun rhyming, so retrogradation, titillation, mitigation, alimentation, toleration, and like, right. So there is like, it's almost like a march, right? Like there's a very specific, contrived rhythm to this text, and so there's those things. You're like, those were the flashes for me. It was not necessarily just like, oh, I get exactly what's being said here, but rather, oh, I see structure. Oh, I see rhythm. Oh, I see music. Oh, there's a moment. Oh, he's talking about the noblesse oblige. Oh, now he's talking about peasants and sort of like, there's all of that. But again, it messes with your sense of that's not how I'm supposed to think about this. That's not how I'm supposed to think about text. That's not how I've been educated to read. And by flipping that on you, it's really disconcerting and discombobulating. But he does give you signposts, which is the like very clear, obvious signpost to lead you through, which I think is just beautiful. It's such a beautiful gift to a reader to go, I'm going to fuck with your sense of how to read something, but I'm also going to allow you to read in a different way.
There was one moment when I was all like, there's always a moment in every section we read where I'm just like, and then there he goes flexing, being like, I could do what's normal, and let me show you that I can do what's normal before I get back to the weird. And it's like that moment where I was like, oh, this is where the man wakes up for just a moment with the whole, describing the house and everything in the room and like just blurrily looking around before his mind slipped. I was like, yeah, the manipulation of form is brilliant. The simple syntax, the short 2 to 3 word sentences to give us that sort of staccato feel. And, I was like, all of that. He's like, yeah, look, I can write the normal thing. And then he goes back to, and now I'm choosing not to, so shut up. Which I absolutely, the audacity of it, I really love.
Yeah. He just has and then as you continue reading through, you get these repeated references that he's dropped all the way through. These little
ear. Yeah,
ear wicker. Yeah, and so getting these moments where it's certain kind of abbreviations or certain kind of phrases or certain kind of references to places around Dublin that would have been very familiar to his readers, maybe not so much to us. But just the punning is it really. Yeah, he's really digging in deep and really asking us to. He's basically saying you can't skim read this book, and you can't read this book once and feel like you've got it, and that's. I think he was reportedly once to say it took me 17 years to write this, so it should take you 17 years to read it. And I guess he means in terms of actually to understand it. We're getting through it in 7 months, and
you're not going to do Wake 2?
Sorry, go on.
The Reawakening, where you just read.
No. I think
TJ's going to write the sequel. No, it's no. I think you could. I think you very much could. But no, I think it's one of those things. I think our discovery of it has been the key, as opposed to our understanding of it. It's not really because as soon as you set out to understand it, then you become. We talk a lot about the purists, and we haven't met very many purists out there. People who take this so seriously that they feel as though you can't have fun with it, but it does take the fun out of it. And so. When you're meeting with people who are taking it very seriously and academically, they're very well intentioned, but they're also it's not very much fun. So we're trying to have fun with it, and all of those Asian repetitions that you had as you were going. I mean, it's standing on their own. The meaning of them means nothing, but then after you've got, I think there's close to 40 of them in that one paragraph. And after a while, it's just, you go, oh, you're just having fun here. Joyce is just having fun with us. He's taken a repeated, and he's just gonna. It's Python-esque. It's wonderful.
No, it reminds me of like this when you were saying it, Jason. I was like, this would be if an actor got on stage and they had a monologue with all of those rhymes in it. Regardless, right? If they just did it well, they'd get applause every time.
Yeah.
You know, after they'd get applause every single time.
Yeah, it's like a Rowan Atkinson character.
Yeah,
it's also kind of like a preacher was the hit that I got, like, which is again, to my mind, that's an indication that they're like what he's doing is meant to be heard and read. Like there's like like oral folk and so before like written language, because written language is relatively new, but most languages that have ever existed, to the tune of over 90% of languages, have never had a written component. And so how do you communicate ideas through time just through oral storytelling, and preaching is one way in which you do that. And the repetition of words is one way that you could, like, people could just remember something. So again, there's so many things, beautiful things nestled in here.
We always spend the time at this point of the podcast to sort of give a bit of sense about meaning, about what is happening based on what the Oxford World Classics talk about, and it's becoming less and less important, I think. We always go through it, and I will go through it just because there's a lot of detail that the academics out there have said this is what is happening, and it may well be true, but then I don't know if it ever really elevates our enjoyment. So this is so this is what they talk about. I mentioned it before. We read Book 3, Chapter 4, pages 555 to 572, Dawn, an intensely structured chapter and a shift, relatively speaking, from the surrealism of all that's gone before into a degree of realism. We seem to float with two narrators through the Chapel Inn at night, describing the sleeping inhabitants, the porters, and others, all versions of characters already encountered. A small nocturnal domestic drama unfolds. One of the twins, Jerry, wakes. His mother soothes him back to sleep. The parents have sex. Dawn approaches. The husband slumbers, anxious with money problems. The chapter rotates around 4 points of view, camera positions, signaled by 4 musical chords. Number 1, first position of the harmony on 559. Number 2, the second position of discordance, Mesido on page 564. Third position of concord, Sidome on 582, which we didn't get to. And then fourth position of solution, to me, see on page 590, which so sort of like a circularity. So in terms of what happens in each of those sections, so 555 to 558.31 is a survey of characters, some asleep in the house and others elsewhere related to them. We start with the 4, pleased by the lad Kevin or Sean, but disturbed by his twin brother Jerry or Shem, pretty little Isabel, Sackerson the watchman, Kate seeing a ghost, the 12 as a jury, the leap year girls, HCE and ALP. 558 to 532, 558 32 to 5633. A cry off is signalled. We move through a bedroom as a film set. Again, a cry is heard, perhaps the same one. Mrs. Porter, ALP, followed by her husband, goes down to investigate. The narrators, curious, discuss the Porters, especially the girl Buttercup and the twins. 564 to 516. Shift to perspective 2. HCE's bottom as Phoenix Park. A suggestion of homophobia within the narrator's relations. 56517 to 5667. Jerry, his nightmare odor, is soothed back to sleep. An Esperanto dialogue between the parents. Chapel Izzard is such a reassuring place to visit back to sleep now. 5668 to 56627. An early modern courtly survey of characters, suggesting the princes in the tower murdered by Richard III. 56628 to 56715. Back to the park at night. A signpost. A phallus with a condom. 56716 to 56823. Thoughts turn to tomorrow when the king will visit. 56824 to 57013. At a ceremony, the mayor will present keys. The king will knight him. The church bells will ring amid general celebrations if tomorrow comes. 57014 to 57126. Dialogue about Mr. Porter's status. A need for a P is mentioned. Then the springs in Phoenix Park are aptly described. Sounds made by HCE and ALP are listened to by the 4. 57127 to 57217. The younger generation will succeed by the older. Anxious dialogue about Izzy's door being open. Oh, that's just death. I'm sorry to the listeners. So much academic analysis, like just, and I don't know how much it's bringing us. Like, I don't think we're all enriched now, having heard about those details, because, like you say, Jason, the benefit to this reading isn't necessarily the meaning of what is happening so much as the tone of how it's said.
So as we were reading, I was there was a part of my brain that was going, could you actually translate, maybe this has been done, could you translate this into pedestrian English, or, something more approximating? Because again, like a lot of, again, like he's playing with language that you could iron it out and make it make sense. But then, is it the same thing? No, you turn it into a different beast. Part of the joy is that nimbleness with which you're kind of bouncing along. It's almost like you're a stone skipping along the top of a lake, and you're like, I don't know what's down there, and part of me wants to stop and swim around, but there's something just joyful about skimming the surface of a thing and feeling that lightness and sense of velocity. Because that's the other thing. Like, once you start reading, you just got to move, right? Like, there's no. I think even my whole first section was one long sentence, right? Like, there's no actual period until that ellipses. So that's the other thing he's asking you to do, is like, just go, like, don't stop. There's a momentum to this that is necessary. Yeah, it's interesting hearing the analysis. I'm sure, how many doctoral dissertations do we think have been written about this book in the last 100 years? But
we had someone who is actually doing the doctoral dissertation on this book on the show.
What did they have to say?
They're talking more about amateur reading groups and how, like, doing what we're doing, which is just reading it without any kind of academic approach. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people are approaching this in a lot of different ways, and it's really interesting. I think if you were to quote unquote translate it, it becomes a different beast, and whether or not it's just like you can read No Fear Shakespeare, but if no one's reading No Fear Shakespeare and reading on the the left side of the page or whatever it is, which is translated into modern English, and then pretending they've read Shakespeare, because that's not the same thing. It's and quite often terrible. Or when Julian Fellows wrote the film adaptation of Romeo and Juliet in 2013. Julian Fellows is the guy who wrote Downton Abbey. Then he did an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. Then he decided to modernize a lot of the language, because he went, well, people won't understand it, so we got to modernize Romeo and Juliet, the most famous play ever written. But okay, let's modernize the language. And so he was doing things like saying, when the nurse enters after meeting with Romeo, she's supposed to say, "Fie, how my back aches. What a back have I." And Julian Fellows thought the audience would understand that, so she changed it to, "Oh, my back is killing me." Now, to suggest that is an update that benefits the product, all it does is pull the audience out and go, "What the heck? That's not Shakespeare." So it's a similar kind of thing. If you try to give us an easy reading version of Joyce, and I think people have tried to do it, but I think maybe it's cheating. I think it would probably be too great a project for anyone to do. Honestly, I mean, it's so much depth.
To what end? Like, to what are you actually quote unquote solving? I mean, I recently watched I think it's called Anyone But You, which was the Glenn Powell Sydney Sweeney rom-com that came out last year. And about 10 minutes into it, I was like, oh, it's Much Ado About Nothing. Like, I didn't know anything about the movie. I hadn't read anything about it. I hadn't seen a trailer. And it took me 10 minutes to recognize the story structure and go, great, this is a Shakespeare adaptation. But to my mind, that's the joy of that, is that Shakespeare's story, like actual narrative structure, can still work. And that in and of itself is very cool and interesting. And of course, we should have modern adaptations of that material. But it also does conversely emphasize of like the loss of again, the dimensionality of language. I don't know. It's what do you say to a person who comes across this book and cracks it open and goes, oh, there's no way I could possibly understand this. I don't get it. This is dumb, or it makes me feel stupid or whatever, and puts it right down. Because it's the same, we face that same challenge with Shakespeare, with, I'm sure, many contemporary novelists, like, we were talking to Stephen King an hour ago, and it's like, yeah, there's accessibility and there's beauty to language. And I think I don't know, I often wonder if I make people feel stupid when they're reading my stuff. And that's something that I don't want to do. But at the same time, I also don't want to treat people like they're dumb. So I have read a lot of books the last couple of years that I'm like, you don't have to, like, I'm not 6. I can deal with, more complex ideas and thoughts and words. And so there is always a bit of a balance.
Yeah.
But this is so far to one extreme. How do you bring, and I think this is what you're doing, right? Is this your effort to say, listen, here's a bunch of intelligent people come together to try to read this. It's really hard, but there's a joy that there's something that you can reap from the effort, even if you stumble and feel dumb or feel confused or struggle with meaning.
Yeah, I think that question of accessibility is always something that I think is important if you are, this sounds like a cop-out, but if you're worried about it, right? There are always pieces of media that just take a different level of like dedication to get into, be it books, be it movies, be it music. Like I can think of a crazy news story that I didn't expect to bring up on this podcast, but like André 3000 put out a new album this year, and it's all flute music, right? And the way that people were like, "What the hell is he doing?" But like, these are people who are not musicians and don't understand and don't listen to the album and be like, "There's nuance and skill and like virtuosity in this album that you just didn't know he had, and therefore you're rejecting it." Right? Accessibility, I think, is always a sliding scale, and it is about like, the people who are going to try to go for it are the people who are going to try to go for it. The same people who like love the deep cuts of classical music are not the same people who are listening to Carly Rae Jepsen, right? Or they are the people who are like, Carly Rae Jepsen is actually doing something melodic that you're not even understanding because you don't have this deep foundation into the deep, like basements of musicology, right? So I think that is always a question. And I think that accessibility is, or material is always about, to what end are you accessing everything that this text can possibly give you? Yeah. Right? The people who don't understand myth just look at Harry Potter and they're like, oh, look, it's Harry Potter. But the people who understand myth around the world are like, and now I see all the things that J.K. Rowling has borrowed from, which then gives me a different level of meaning to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think, but it's also significant that if André 3000's first ever introduction to the world was an album of flute music, it wouldn't hit the same way, right?
No,
right?
Yeah, right.
So I mean, there's a good reason why Megalopolis was happened now. Francis Ford Coppola, you don't start your career with that.
It might be the end of his career. So like,
exactly. So Joyce did the same thing. He said, we're gonna start easy, and the Dubliners aren't easy. Dubliners are, but it's not a slog. It's a really breezy read. I read it again last week and took me, two sittings really to read it. And it's very straightforward and really enjoyable. But then it's not Finnegans Wake. It's just not. He's really progressing through. I wonder that Anything But You movie. I wonder, because it did maintain its Shakespearean credentials by maintaining character names of B and Ben as the lead characters' names, and then it had sort of Shakespeare phrases on the walls, as part of the set design. So it's really sort of trying to remind us that, oh, this comes from somewhere classy, so stick with us. I mean, I wonder if you had used exactly the same cast and exactly the same setting, but just done a production of Much Ado About Nothing, it probably wouldn't have made $1 billion like it did. But if you took away those character names, took away all the references to Shakespeare, would it still have succeeded? Probably, because you came to it not as a Shakespearean, you came to it as a moviegoer. just the same way all those people wanted to see those beautiful young people, not because they were interested in the Shakespeare adaptation. So I thought it was I kind of felt as though it was almost a cop-out to have to continue to hurry back to say, trust us, this is Shakespeare. So this ridiculous setting is not it's not us, it's Shakespeare. And then they subvert it halfway through when the Beatrice and Benedict characters figure out that it's a trick immediately, as opposed to the play where they go all the way to the end. So yeah, it's interesting the way that audience has to be taken into account in that sense. Look, we've gone on for a long time, and I think we could probably go on for another hour, because this is the kind of thing that happens when we three get together. So, but this has been a long one, and I don't want to take up too much more of your day. So I do appreciate it. We'll end our episode of Wake there. So if people are trying to find copies of Reg and Privilege, where can they find those?
Good old Amazon whatever, wherever you are, .com.ca. If you search my name, you'll probably find my website, which will direct you to Amazon.
Excellent, great. Well, we hopefully can move some units for you, and we'll link to all of those in our show notes as well to make sure that people know how to find you. And those plays of yours, are they also linked on your website? They're findable. People can always just send me an email. You know what? I love emails. Perfect. Let's just get emails. I was putting it out on Instagram here. I'm not all right. So we'll dox you. Perfect. Excellent. Well, it's been so great to have you here, and so great to get a chance to introduce you to Joyce, and hopefully you will dig in a bit more, because he really is worth time. So I know to approach it like music. Yeah, it's a really great way of looking at it. I love that. So that is all the time we have for Wake. We will return next week for the final reading of Book 3. Unbelievably, it's just flown by, and TJ and I will do another summary of Book 3, and then we're nearly at the end. It's crazy. So our thanks once again to Jason Rothery for joining us. It's been a real pleasure to reconnect, and hopefully we'll do more of this in future. I've been Toby Malone, joined as ever by TJ Young. We'll see you next week, wonderful widows of 18 Springs. This has been Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. If you've made it this far, thank you for your dedication. Join us next week for another segment of Finnegans Wake and a chat about what we've found. Wake is a Moon Street Media podcast, engineered by TJ Young and Toby Malone. Our theme song is The Ballad of Perso Riley, arranged and performed by Meg Logue after James Joyce. Wake is recorded in Canada, where Finnegans Wake is in the public domain. For community and bonus content, join us at our free Patreon at patreon.com/wakepod. If you have questions about Finnegans Wake, don't ask us. We're just as confused as you are. See you next week.